Well, this is a little awkward. Micahistory's first video covered a little bit of what happened with Japan and its history. But now, let's say this. So we move on from Europe to the East, looking to the nation that's just risen from backwards militarism, Japan. So let's say that in the years before World War II, Japan has modernized, and most importantly, they created a system where being patriotic does not mean invading random countries for the glory of the emperor. So the Japanese nation is a nation of true patriots, not a nation of shoguns. Well, not a nation of, absolute fanatics. And so now that they are a nation full of true patriots, um, the emperor begins to create some type of constitutional monarchy. Of course, the military will be given their due power, but not enough power to start causing random war crimes, genocides, etc. Only enough power to essentially exist. Hey, good girl. Well, only enough power to, for example, maybe influence foreign policy or certain aspects of civilian policy. So we would have the military at one side, the civilian government at another side, and then the emperor on top. So, but even though the Japanese monarchy would be moderated, they would still want somewhat of an empire. Manchuria would be the perfect target to set up a colony. How would Japan get it? Well, simple, the same way the US got Florida. After some sort of attack by a Chinese warlord, the Japanese government would demand the Republic to either govern the territory themselves or leave Manchuria entirely. The Republic of China, realizing that they cannot properly fulfill that demand, agreed to cede Manchuria to Japan in exchange for an agreement that Japan would not claim any more territory from China. So Japan obviously begins to build up the colony politically, militarily, in every single way they possibly can. Japan as an empire wanted resources. They wanted resources. And they believe that the best way to get these resources it's through political, it's through these different colonies. And so Manchuria, of course, would be created as a functioning state to give resources to Japan, so Japan would create better products and sell that to their colony. And so Japan would be rather peaceful up until the 1940s. So the Germans, they've already began attacking the Soviet Union. Japanese are anti-communist. Japanese fear, in fact, a communist takeover. So what do? They attack the Soviet Union. And so they gain Vladivostok, they gain the Kuril Islands, and they gain Sakhalin. Decent amounts of territory. They expand Manchuria to, in fact, the old Qing borders. Or, to greater Manchuria. And so the Japanese, they'd also attack Indochina, other areas from France, Pacific Islands, but they would not attack Pearl Harbor. And so the Japanese, following the Second World War the Japanese Empire aided China on their mission to liberate the Chinese people from communism. The Republic of China is opposed to communism. The Empire of Japan is opposed to communism. They can both make that deal. And so following that, Japan would continue to build up and increase the size, strength, and prosperity of the Japanese nation, of the Tenno Reich. And so now that Japan is fully and utterly, totally prosperous, what now? What next? Japan would begin to, well, and so now that Japan has its empire, Japan would build prosperity, etc. But, and through the ages, the Japanese nation would, you know, they'd be very much like Imperial Britain within Asia. So they'd be the peacekeepers of Asia, and they'd also be, a lot of Japanese nationalism believes in securing Asia from foreign intervention. Securing Asia from the West. So that's obviously what they would do. But eventually, the Chinese nationalists would begin to rise in strength. They're already opposed to the Japanese nation. They want Manchuria back. They want their old territory back. Japan, during the 1960s, they would be fighting some type of war in Vietnam. And so China would intervene. Oh, and so, the Vietnam Wars would be fought. And so now that Japan is sort of devastated from losing their colony in Vietnam and Indochina, the Chinese, they attack. They immediately rush forward into Manchuria, catch Japan by surprise, and absolutely, enforce the Japanese nation to politically and culturally surrender. Now, um, and so eventually the Russians, the Soviet Russians and the Chinese begin to combat over Manchuria. The Russians win due to the Chinese victory. Japan today is a nation that, although it's no longer an empire, there's still a very, and they might still have control over Korea, by the way. But although Japan right now is no longer an empire, there's still is no longer as big of an empire as they used to be. There's still a power within Asia, and they are seen as a great moderator. The internet in this timeline was created by Japan. And Japan has became a source of technology, culture, and generally moderation. And the idea of, every nation can make peace. When the World Congress was created in the early 1980s, or, when a world summit was created in the early 1980s, Japan became the helm of that summit. And Japan became the leader of, and every nation in the world came to Japan. And so Japan is renowned as a very diplomatic and negotiable nation. So, arigato gozaimasu. And sayonara. This is Julius Caesar getting stabbed by Brutus.